Hi, I'm Madison Mary and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, please don't hesitate to click that subscribe button down below. And without further ado, let's get into my Josei Manga video. So if you're not aware of what Josei Manga is, basically it is adult romance manga. So it features characters who are in their 20s and 30s. They tend to be a little bit slice of life, and it just is like an older version of shoujo manga. And so if you are someone who is looking for romance mangas but with more adult characters facing more adult problems, whether they're in college or in the workforce, this is definitely the video for you. Some of these do get a little bit steamy, some of them are just pretty, you know, clean and cute. So there's something for everyone in this video, and if you do like it, please let me know down below and I will create even more. All the manga that I'm going to be recommending today will be manga that if you live in the United States, you can buy in English physically or ebook wise. So that is what I'm going to be doing. So for each of these mangas, I will show you my physical copy of it, and then I will also just be putting up a digital version of it just because there's a lot of glare with all these covers. So the first book that I'm going to be talking about, the one that I'm most excited for because it's a brand new favorite manga of mine, is Sweat and Soap. So in Sweat and Soap we're following Asako, and she sweats profusely. She has sweated profusely since she was a child, and she's very self-conscious about it. She was always like running to put deodorant on the toilet. She's always like dabbing herself. She's perfuming herself 24/7. It's something that she's very, very self-conscious about, and there's only one company that actually makes a soap and perfumes that work well for her and mask her scent, and that is a toiletry company called Lily Drop. Now she's been working there as a laborer and she absolutely adores it because she gets to see all the new lines before they come in. But then one day she ends up attracting the attention of the company's lead product developer, who is basically the person who like comes up with all the new scents, and he smells her like sweat. This sounds really weird. He smells her sweat one day when she's like really excited over a new perfume smell, and he's like, that is the best scent in the entire world. And she becomes really self-conscious of it. She's like, why, well, what's going on? And he's like, I want to study you, like I want to study your smells. I want to, you know, maybe try and come up with something for that. And she's like initially really weirded out by this and kind of like scared because she's so self-conscious about her sweating. But then like she slowly starts to open up to him, and like he loves being around her, and he like notices that, you know, when her emotions change, she smells different depending on what her emotions are, because he's got like such a like really strong nose. And then like she kind of starts falling for him, and then he starts falling for her, and it's like a really adorable and hilarious relationship that they start having. I absolutely adore it. This one does get a little steamy, not too much, but you know, you do get some of those scenes of their like first time and like the aftermath and things like that. So that is present in this, but it's a really sweet manga, especially because it's between an introvert and an extrovert. Asako, she's very self-conscious. She doesn't really do much with other people. And you know, Notori-san, he is just like, he's very much out there. He's very outspoken. He's beloved by a lot of people in the company. He's extremely popular. And so she's a little bit self-conscious about that, but he's just like, he's just such a cinnamon roll. I can't even. He is hilarious, and he's so attuned to her. Like he cares so much about like how she's feeling and wants to make sure that she's at her happiest, and like he just wants her well-being, and it's just like an adorable romance. Then we have Perfect World. So we're following Tsugumi, and she is 26 years old. She has just kind of really started her career as an interior designer, and there is a company get together, and when she goes to it, she ends up seeing her high school crush for the first time since she graduated, and that is Itsuki, and he is an architect at the company, and she's like, oh my god, this is crazy. But then she ends up finding out that he was actually in a biking accident during college and is now paralyzed from the waist down. And at first she's like, how could I date someone with a disability? Like, I don't think this is something possible in my life. But then as she, you know, begins to get to know him more and see his determination and all his struggles and his pain and how he gets through it all, she begins to fall for him all over again. And she's just like, I want to be with him. But then he's all like, I don't want to be with anyone. I don't want to be in a relationship because I don't want anyone to take on me as a burden. Like, I don't want to be a burden on my significant other because looking after me is tough work. Like, there's a lot of effort to go into a relationship with someone who is disabled. And so there's a lot of talk in this about what it is like to be paralyzed, all the issues that you go through, like, you know, bed sores, unplanned excretion, not having accessible places to go to and needing help to get to places. And there's a lot of talk about that, but there's just also a lot of talk about, you know, finding your passion, because Tsugumi, she used to want to be a painter and she kind of gave up on that dream long ago, but you know, seeing how Itsuki, how he managed to actually pursue his passion kind of reignites that in herself. And so it's her trying to get him to fall for her and her being like, I want this relationship and I'm determined to make it work, and him kind of still being a little bit closed off from that. And so it's a really beautiful, beautiful manga. I cried 3 times reading the first volume. I'm not kidding you. This one is extremely emotional and it will make you extremely emotional, so do know that before going into this one. Then we have one that is set in college, and that is going to be A Sign of Affection. So in this one we're following Yuki, and she's a college student. She's really into fashion and she loves, you know, hanging out with her friends, but she is also deaf. And she has always been deaf. Even though she does wear a hearing aid, she still really can't hear anything except for just noises. And so she can read lips, but she is, you know, communicates best with sign language. But her and her best friend actually communicate mostly via texting one another. And so one day she's on the train and this guy comes up to her and is asking like for directions, and she's standing there and she's like, I don't know what to do. And then this guy comes in and he, you know, helps diffuse the situation, helps give the guy directions, and then she ends up kind of getting a little bit of butterflies from meeting this guy. And then she realizes that this guy actually goes to her college, and she ends up getting introduced to him and she starts kind of falling for him. And he's actually a student who is trilingual. He's part of the international club. He constantly travels, does a lot of community work, and that's kind of what he is about. And so he starts trying to learn sign language for her and with her, and it's a really, really sweet relationship that blossoms. I've only read the first 2 volumes and I can definitely see the potential love triangle coming. I'm rooting for him just a little bit. I do adore like the main couple of this, but I don't know, I kind of like this other guy. But there's a lot of talk about this, you know, to do with sign language and how there are different versions of sign language in Japanese. And there's actually a little author's note at the end of the first manga kind of explaining her process and the different signs that she does use and how she has shown them in the manga, like, you know, the directions and how people do signs. So I thought that was really interesting. Then we have a Yuri manga, and that is Donuts Under a Crescent Moon. If you're new to manga and you don't know what Yuri means, it basically means it's a female-female relationship. So this one is quite heavily based in the workplace, and we are following Hinako, and she is a career woman and she is struggling. She constantly spends her money on makeup and fashion and all these different girly things because she hopes that, you know, presenting herself as like the perfect woman, the most desirable woman, will help her fall in love. The only problem is that every single time she goes on a date with a guy and the guy shows interest in her, she just never feels anything back, and she kind of gets a little bit grossed out from the men. And she really thinks that there's something wrong with her. She just doesn't understand how she can't seem to fall in love with any of these guys that she's with, and all her friends are dating and all her friends keep setting up on dates, and she's like, is there something wrong with me? What is going on? However, there's other woman at her work, Sato, and she is really cool and just very level-headed, always getting her work done, and she's just, you know, this woman that, you know, Hinako really respects. And then one day they end up having a chance meeting outside of work, and she offers Hinako donuts because she's like, hey, whenever I get upset, I mess up at work, I buy donuts and I eat them. And Hanako looks at her and she goes, even you mess up at work? And she's like, yeah, even I do, like, it's fine. And how from the beginning you do know that Sato is lesbian from conversations that she has with her sister, and so you can see that she kind of does have this crush on Hinako-chan, but she's very, you know, reluctant to admit this. And Hinako-chan, she starts to, you know, wonder, like, what's going on? Like, why do I feel so comfortable with this other woman? Like, what are these feelings that I'm feeling? And so it's a really sweet romance. It's very much slow burn, so do know that going into it, but it's adorable and I highly recommend it. Then we have one that is nice and spicy for all of you out there. If you want one that's a little bit more on the side, then you're gonna want Yakuza Lover. Really need to put this down. My manga it's still wrapped. I haven't actually taken it out in the wrapping because I read this as an ebook instead. I like to double check before I buy my mangas physically that I actually will like them, so that's what I did. So this one is still wrapped. I don't know, whenever I have my wrapped mangas, I think it's kind of fun to keep them in the wrapping. So that is Yakuza Lover. This just came out at the beginning of June, so it is a brand new release. And in this one, we are following college student Yuri, and she is extremely feisty, very opinionated, and she's at a party one day, and she ends up actually getting attacked, and she ends up getting saved by Toshiomi, who is the head of a Yakuza gang. And she has this chance meeting with him, and she kind of feels this connection to him right away. And then a couple days later, she ends up seeing him again, and they kind of form this like really instant relationship. So it's very insta-lovey, like things progress very quickly, but you know, she falls for him and he kind of falls for her because he loves her tenacity and he loves just who she is, and he thinks that she is, while she is very feisty and out there, she's also very naive and doesn't really know much about romance in the world. And so it's about the two of them kind of quickly falling in love with each other in this whirlwind romance between this Yakuza and a college student. And so there is an age gap between them. It does get very steamy. There are a lot of, you know, kind of gruesome scenes as well to do with, you know, being in the Yakuza and, you know, torture and death and shootings and things like that. So it is a little bit full force. I personally don't think it's like too like out there, but you know, compared to like, you know, regular mangas, it does have a bit more in it than some people are used to. I would say I probably have 5 like top mangakas that I adore no matter what they put out there, and this is from one of those mangakas, and that is Natsumi Ando, and that manga is going to be Something's Wrong With Us. So Something's Wrong With Us, I would actually kind of call it more of a mystery thriller josei manga, because while there is a focus on this romance that is going on, there is actually a major mystery that is taking place throughout this series, which is quite similar to her shoujo series ɪṛsᴛᴏ, which also follows a murder. So Folly now, who is 21 years old, and she has been all her life training to follow in her mother's footsteps to become a Japanese sweet maker. At such a young age, her skills are so unparalleled that she actually ends up getting a spot at this top confectionery company in Japan. However, when she meets the young, handsome heir to the company, she ends up realizing that it's Tsubaki, who was her very first friend as a child, and also the boy who accused her mother of murder and put her in jail. Tsubaki was the only witness to the crime of Nao's mother murdering his father, and so she decides to use her position at the company to get close to him and find out what really happened that day. And so it's really interesting because within this first volume, he ends up figuring out who she is, and he kind of begins to think, okay, I can, while she's trying to use me, I'm going to use her, and the two of them end up actually getting fake engaged within this first volume. And so it's definitely a heavy enemies to lovers romance, because they despise one another and they are only doing this arranged marriage to get something out of it for themselves. And so it's a very dark josei manga, despite there being romance in it. I really love the Japanese sweet making in it. It's not something that you see too often, and I really love learning about like this traditional form of art when it comes to food, and so highly recommend it. I just also really love Natsumi Ando like to the moon and back. So next we're gonna go on to a classic josei manga. Well, I think it's a classic personally, and that is Wotakoi, Love is Hard for an Otaku. I also would like to quickly say that I highly recommend you check out the anime for this. The anime only spans the first 2 volumes of this, but it's definitely worth it, and I absolutely adore this so much. It's so adorable. Okay, look. So we are following Narumi, and she's a hardcore otaku, okay? Like full to the max. If you're not aware of an otaku is, they're basically really huge manga, anime, gaming fans, like to the max. And Narumi is actually a closet mangaka, as well as being an MMO player and also a huge BL fan. And so she always hides her otaku side because she tries to present herself as super girly, super normal, so that she can land like a great boyfriend, and she did, until he found out that she was an otaku, and then he ended up telling everyone at her company that she was an otaku, and she was just completely like mortified. So she quit her job and ended up getting a new job at a different company, and when she has her first day at this company, she ends up realizing that her childhood best friend actually works there. His name is Hirotaka, and he doesn't hide his otaku-ness. He, during all his lunch breaks, will just sit there on his phone and play this MMO game. And so they end up rekindling their old childhood friendship, and Hirotaka at one point, he's actually been secretly in love with her since they were children. He ends up saying, well, if you have so much trouble dating regular guys, why don't you date me? I already know that you're an otaku and I have no problem with that, and I think you're really awesome. And she sits there for a second and she goes, okay, why not? And so they start dating, and it is so adorable. You don't just follow their relationship, you actually follow also their best friends. And Hirotaku's best friend is Kabakura-san, and he is actually the manager of like their company. So it's kind of funny because Narumi does struggle at getting her things done. She's a huge procrastinator, and so he's always making fun of her. He is a closet otaku, like he is an otaku, but he's not as big as everyone else is. He's actually kind of funny. But he is actually dating one of their co-workers, Koyanagi, and she is awesome. She's very like stiff and serious at work, really cool, and like everyone sees her and thinks that like, wow, she's so amazing. Like, I wish I was like her. But she is like probably the biggest otaku out of all of them. Like, she cosplays to the max, is way into BL. She likes making everyone else cosplay, and like just the four of them together, like going on like all their little otaku things that they do, it's just so I freaking love it. It's so much fun. If you are someone who is a huge fan of manga or anime or gaming, you will totally relate to this. I would say around 50% of this manga takes place, you know, in the workplace, and then the other 50% is just their daily lives, and you get introduced to a couple other characters throughout, and it's just really fun. Then I have one that is paranormal, and that is Midnight Secretary. Now, I've only read the first 2 volumes of this one, so I can't tell you if it stays as good as it has started, but you're following Kaya, and she is an amazing secretary, and she really prides herself on being like the best of the best. So when she is reassigned to be the secretary of the company's director, who is known for being notoriously difficult and a demanding person, she doesn't bat an eye. She's like, I can do this, like, don't second guess me. And she quickly learns that he has this rotating roster of women that he meets with every single week, and you know, she doesn't really bat an eye on it. She's like, okay, he's just a horny dude, whatever. Until she realizes that he's a vampire, and these are the women that he, you know, has sexual relationships with every week, but also feeds off of. Some things kind of start between them, and they kind of begin a romance. It's a really unique one, you know. You would not normally see this genre having, you know, paranormal aspects to it, but it's really fun, and it's a pretty solid vampire one because it's not too entrenched in vampirism, but it's very like very smoothly kind of just like slipped into the plot. So this one also does get a bit more on like the steamier side. So I would say the steamiest so far would probably be Sweat and Soap, Midnight Secretary, and then you have Yakuza Lover, which is like way up there. Then we have the very first Josei manga. Well, actually, I don't think it was the first Josei manga that I read, but the first Josei manga that I purchased for myself, and that is Happy Marriage. And this one is an arranged marriage manga. So we're following Chiwa, and she works during the day as a regular career woman, but at night she actually works as a hostess at a club because her dad tried to start his own business with all their money, and it crashed and burned, and now they're in huge debt, and so she's trying to find a way to repay that because their mother ran out on them. And so that's what she's currently trying to figure out, when one day she is called to her company's office, and she's a little bit worried because she's like, oh no, did they find out about my night job? And instead, when she gets in there, it's her company director, the president, and his grandfather, and she's a little bit confused at first. She's like, I don't really get what's going on here. And then she learns that her late grandmother actually made a kind of agreement with this grandfather of her company's president, and the agreement was that the two of them would have an arranged marriage to, you know, set her well off. And at first she's like, this is weird, why would I do this? But then she realizes that it would help repay her father's debts, and so she agrees to this arranged marriage to her company's president. And it's kind of crazy because she doesn't think it's like that binding of an agreement. She thinks it's just a very chill thing. But Mamiya, who is the company president, he thinks it's a very binding agreement. He's very serious about this marriage and is taking it like to the max of what it could be. And the two of them actually end up deciding to keep their relationship a secret from like the actual company itself, because she doesn't really want that pressure while she's at work. And so it's very funny because they're such opposing personalities. Like, it's Grump and Sunshine to the max. Like, she is just this very bubbly, outgoing, really stubborn person, and he is just very serious and like takes everything to the edge, and he just is very cold at times and very unfeeling. And so it's really funny to watch the two of them fall for each other. Then second to last, we have Everyone's Getting Married, another classic Josei manga. So in this one we're following, well, okay, you're following 4 different people, but you're mainly following Asuka, and she is a very successful career woman. She's been doing really well in her life, and she has this boyfriend that she's been dating for years, and she kind of put a lot of her own desires on hold for him to, like, you know, help him get to like a really top position in his own company. So she would go to all like the dinners and stuff for him, and then he breaks up with her because he has become too successful for her. And she is just distraught. She's like, we have been together for years. I have done everything for you, and you're leaving me because of all the guidance and help I gave you. And he goes, yep, bye. And she is distraught because like all she's really ever wanted in life was to become a housewife. Like, yeah, she's a huge successful career woman, but she wants to raise a family. She wants to have children. And that's like, for her, like that is the ultimate desire. And so she's like, now I'm at this age where I don't know what I'm gonna do anymore. Like, how can I find a new relationship? I've just wasted all this time. And so she ends up going to this, you know, outing one night with her friend, and she ends up running into this guy named Ryunanami, and he's a very popular newscaster, but he has negative desires to get married. He's like, yes, I'm interested in relationships and, you know, being with people, but I will never ever get married. That is not the life that I want. So they have very different aspirations at the end of the day, but they actually kind of start falling for one another. And so it's a very reluctant relationship that begins between the two of them. And it's really about, you know, the whole idea of, you know, when you fall for someone, when you find that person you're meant to be with, relationships are about compromise, and it's about open communication, and it's about, you know, realizing that over time, as you find the person that you meant to be with, your views will change and what you want will change, and, you know, adapting to that. And so this is like a very, very realistic manga, like out of all them. Well, okay, this one and Wotakoi, I would say, are the most realistic mangas when it comes to, you know, real life, and you can kind of see this happening to yourself. And so that's what I really like about this one. And then for my final manga, while you can buy it physically, technically it is discontinued. So unless you do own them from years ago, you can't really buy them anymore unless you buy them off of like a used website. And even then, people are upping the prices for these mangas at like $30 a pop. Like, it's ridiculous how much people are trying to sell these for. But you can read them on Kindle Unlimited, so for anyone who does have that, you can read this one digitally. But that one is Tramps Like Us, which is also known as Kimi wa Pet or You Are My Pet. There are many different versions of this. There's also a live action of this one. There might be a live action for a couple of those, but I don't actually remember. But this one I know does have a live action. So in this one, we're following Sumire, and she is a very, very successful career woman. Like, so successful that other men are intimidated by her because they're like, I don't want to date a woman who has a higher position than me. I don't want to date a woman who puts work before me. I don't want to date a woman who makes more money than me. And so her ex-boyfriend at the very beginning of the series breaks up with her because of that. And she sits there and she's like, you know what? Screw you. I'm too good for you anyway. And on her way home, she ends up coming across this box on the side of the road that is moving. And she's like, what on earth is going on? And there is this man inside this box. And she's like, what on earth is going on? And he's like, I need a place to stay because my old landlord tried to come on to me and I can't go back there. And she looks at this boy and she's like, you know what? Why don't you come live with me? Why don't you come and be my pet? I've been told I need a pet, so why don't you be my pet? And he's like, okay, I'll be your pet. And he's like, what would you like to call me? And she's like, what? And he's like, well, people normally name their pets. What would you like my name to be? And she's like, I'm going to call you Momo. And so he this sounds so weird when I explain it now that I'm thinking about it. So he ends up living with her in her apartment. He is a professional dancer, and he basically, other than doing his dancing stuff, he lives at her apartment and, you know, cleans it for her, is there waiting for her. Like, he acts, you know, like a pet. He's there to comfort her, and, you know, they don't actually have a romantic relationship in the beginning. And it's just really messy because she ends up starting this new relationship with a guy at her company who is very successful, who seems like the perfect fit for her. And then Momo kind of starts getting back with his ex-girlfriend. And so it's a very messy series about adults who are openly very sexual. This is really about, you know, being in multiple relationships and having multiple partners and, you know, being sexually free. Like, sexual freedom in this is very much, you know, talked about, and I really, like, out of all these, I really love how sex positive this one is. It's a huge plus for me. It's a really great series if you can stick it out. There are 14 volumes, and so it's pretty long, but you know, actually a lot of these are pretty long now that I think about it, but yes, that is part 1. If you do want to see a part 2, please leave a comment down below so I know that this is definitely something that you want to see more of. And yeah, thank you for watching this video. If you want to see more of me, please go to my channel, and until next time, thanks a bunch everyone. Bye bye!